The Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to the disciples, "The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. When he went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, 'Why are you standing here idle all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' He said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, 'Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first.' When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, 'These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.' But he replied to one of them, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous?' So, Jesus says, the last will be first, and the first will be last." The Gospel of the Lord. Every story, no matter what it is, seems to be a variation on a single theme. This should not be happening. I should not be having this experience. God is unjust. Life is not fair. What do you think? There is so much going on right now that is not fair. Is this ordeal of a pandemic fair? Are the fires on the West Coast fair? Is the latest among so many hurricanes fair? Is the polarization in our country fair? Is racism fair? I remember when my cousin was killed by a drunk driver in her early 20s. I was in college then. Her mother, my aunt, said to me about when the police came to their door with the tragic news, "I guess it was our turn. I guess it was our turn." Some people get resentful and ask, "Why me?" And others ask, "Why not me?" If 2020 has taught us anything, it may very well be that we might all agree on one thing, and that is that life is not fair. That normal is a gift. And that's a takeaway from our lessons today, too. We became accustomed to things going well. And when things take a turn, how easy it is for resentment to creep in and get a foothold. In our gospel today, Jesus tells a parable about God's generosity. Doesn't God reward people according to what they have earned or deserved? That's kind of something that goes around. What would you do if you had worked all day? Would you be grumbling against such a screwball boss who pays people who start working at the end of the day the same as you? And then there's dear Jonah in our first reading, bitter, resentful Jonah. He prays to God, if you won't kill the people of Nineveh, then kill me. Woo! That's some kind of resentment. The great irony in both of these stories is that Jonah and the laborers are that resentful because God is that gracious. In both of these stories, God responds to the resentment by asking questions and by challenging how they think, how they use their brains. To Jonah, God asks, what do you have to be angry about? And just because you may not like these people from Nineveh, does that mean I can't change my mind about them? I am God after all. Hello? In the gospel, the landowner, God asks, didn't you agree with me for the usual daily wage? Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? A woman named Byron Katie became severely depressed in her early 30s. For almost a decade, she spiraled down into rage, self-loathing, and constant thoughts of suicide. For the last 2 years, she was often unable to leave her bedroom. And then one morning, she had a life-changing realization. She calls it waking up to reality. In that instant, she says, I discovered that when I believed my negative thoughts, I suffered. But when I did not believe them, I did not suffer. She realized that what had been causing her depression was not the world around her, but the beliefs she had about the world. Instead of hopelessly trying to change the world to match her thoughts about how it should be, she could ask questions too, just like God does today. She could question her thoughts, and by meeting reality as it is, she could experience freedom and joy. As a result, a bedridden, suicidal woman was filled with love for everything life brings. Out of this experience, a process she calls the work has evolved into something that is helping many people. The first thing she says is, don't argue with reality. We'll wait. I wear hearing aids, so I wouldn't be able to hear myself if I was talking while they went by. So the first thing she says is, don't argue with reality. I wonder, isn't that exactly what bitter Jonah and the resentful laborers are doing? But what's happening is happening, and no amount of wishing on their part is going to make it any different. What is it we all say? It is what it is, huh? How much time do you spend arguing with what's been happening this year? How's that going for you? Has it changed anything? When you argue with reality, you'll lose, but only 100% of the time. Then she asks, whose business are you in? There are only 3 kinds of business in the universe: mine, yours, and God's. And as a community of faith, sometimes I would say also ours. Much of our stress comes from mentally living outside of what is our own business. Didn't Jonah's stress come from fretting about God's business? In our gospel, aren't the day laborers stressed because they are worrying about God's business too? Not to mention the business of the other laborers. After all, weren't these grumbling laborers paid what they had agreed on? They were not slighted. They got what they thought was coming. This all makes me think of the serenity prayer, which should be our mantra these days. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Fall is often a time when congregations think about stewardship. We're going to be doing that soon too. We'll be asking you to make a financial commitment to support TLC's mission and ministry, especially now. Sometimes we expand our thinking about stewardship to include time and talent as well as treasure. And you, TLC, are very good about that too. One faithful church leader I knew, who I had the privilege of working with, used to say, stewardship is everything you do after you say, I believe. The word stewardship literally has to do with taking care of. It comes from the ancient word styward, like the warden of the sty, the one who took care of the pigsty. We're called to be stewards, caretakers of everything we have and everything we are. And these days, probably more than ever before, given what's out there on cable news and social media, it is so important that we be good stewards of our thoughts, of our minds. If you want to understand more about this, I would have said more about this, but I just saw this last night. There's a film on Netflix called, it's trending right now. It's called The Social Dilemma. It's a documentary about what social media is doing to our country and how it's tearing us apart. It is easy to be swept away by overwhelming stressful feelings and then to indulge them the way Jonah indulged his anger. Byron Katie suggests we reframe a stressful feeling or thought. Think of it as a compassionate alarm clock, this stressful thought. It wakes us up and it says, you're caught. It's not possible to suppress your stressful thoughts, but try questioning them. Try asking, is it true? Is this my business? Can I do anything about this? Try exploring, how does thinking this thought make me feel and make me act? Then we can ask God to remove these thoughts from our minds and our hearts. We can open ourselves to the love and presence of God and God's action within. When we question our thoughts, the way God questioned Jonah and the laborers in the vineyard, the thoughts let go of us. Questioning our thoughts and staying in our business is one way to be faithful these days. I will never forget how I once was in a long-term funk about something that happened to me that I did not think should have happened to me. A wise mentor said to me, people who engage in self-righteousness and self-pity don't do as well. That was it. That's all he said. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. We live in a culture that's always bombarding us with feel sorry for yourself and be righteous. I was like, thanks for telling me. No one ever told me that before. And those 11 words changed my life. People who engage in self-pity and self-righteousness don't do as well. Okay then, let's not do that. A rabbi collected an assembly of audio recordings in the days after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. They were the final conversations of those in the towers as they called home on their cell phones, as they called spouses, parents, partners, friends, and left voicemails. What he discovered was this: all the final conversations he had in his collection were about love. Not a single person used his or her last breath to seek revenge, to nurse anger, to express bitterness, self-pity, self-righteousness, or resentment. No one said, kill those creeps for what they have done. Be sure to get revenge. I hate them for what they did to me. Avenge my memory. No. When push came to shove, literally, every last word was an I love you of some variety. Every story is a variation on a single theme. This should not be happening. I should not have to go through this. God is unjust. Life is not fair. Yes, that is true, especially this year. And on the night Jesus was betrayed, he took the cup, and at supper, with his very friends who would betray him, he gave thanks. He gave it for all to drink, and he said, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, shed for you and for all people, for the forgiveness of sin. God is unjust. Life is not fair. Thanks be to God. Amen.